administration, however, from day one, made a point of decreasing the amount of detention space available nationwide. Immigration and Customs Enforcement's funding for detention has steadily been cut and private detention eliminated. The fact that so many illegal aliens are being released into the United States spread worldwide very quickly. As this happened, the numbers the Border Patrol encountered illegally crossing the border increased exponentially. In San Diego, we had an exponential increase in significant interest aliens. These are aliens with significant ties to terrorism. At the time, I was told I could not release any information on this increase in SIAs.
Now, I want to make sure you guys heard that. We're only 45 minutes in, but there's already been a lot. There's already been a lot. So basically what's going on here is that this is a substantiation that there is a serious amount of influx of possible unsafe migrants coming into the country through the southern border as a result of Biden-Harris policy. This is taking place at one of these congressional hearings or Senate hearings or whatever you want to call it, right? Not misinformation. None of this stuff addressed at all by the Biden administration, all right?
For the first time in my 25 years and under 5 different administrations, whether through neglect or on purpose, I saw a large-scale lapse in our ability to return people to their country of origin. The current administration, however, from day one, made a point of decreasing the amount of detention space available nationwide. Immigration and Customs Enforcement's funding for detention has steadily been cut and private detention eliminated. The fact that so many illegal aliens are being released into the United States spread worldwide very quickly. As this happened, the numbers the Border Patrol encountered illegally crossing the border increased exponentially. In San Diego, we had an exponential increase in significant interest aliens. These are aliens with significant ties to terrorism. At the time, I was told I could not release any information on this increase in SIAs or mention any of the arrests. The administration was trying to convince the public there was no threat at the border.
Let me see, hold on. See if they... Let me see, hold on.
The current...
Let me see. Skip there. All right, cool.
Mr. Chairman, distinguished members, thank you for this opportunity. The only true consequence we have to slow down and discourage people from coming into the United States illegally is sending them back to their country of origin. Throughout the first 3+ years of this administration, I saw a steady decrease in the countries we could send people back to. For the first time in my 25 years and under 5 different administrations, whether through neglect or on purpose, I saw a large-scale lapse in our ability to return people to their country of origin. The inability to send people home meant that most people being arrested for illegal entry would either have to be detained or released. The current administration, however, from day one, made a point of decreasing the amount of detention space available nationwide. Immigration and Customs Enforcement's funding for detention has steadily been cut and private detention eliminated. The fact that so many illegal aliens are being released into the United States spread worldwide very quickly. As this happened, the numbers the Border Patrol encountered illegally crossing the border increased exponentially. The impact to me and my agents were significant. Sectors were ordered to take in and process all the illegal aliens encountered on the border. The Border Patrol saw groups of hundreds and thousands coming into the United States and turning themselves in. These numbers pulled 80, 90, sometimes 100% of the agents on duty away from the border. Border Patrol zones across Texas, Arizona, and California had no agent presence for weeks and months at a time. Those who did not want to be caught could simply walk in over this time. Throughout 2022 and 23, sent Texas and Arizona got gotaways. Those sectors could not even put enough agents in the field to see what they'd missed. Simultaneously, in San Diego, we had an exponential. These are aliens with significant ties to terrorism. Prior to this administration, the San Diego sector averaged 10 to 15 SIA arrests per year. Once word was out the border was far easier to cross, San Diego went to over 100 SIAs in 2022, well over that in 2023, and even more than that registered this year. These are only the ones we caught. At the time, I was told I could not release any information on this increase in SIAs or mention any of the arrests. The administration was trying to convince the public there was no threat at the border. Fentanyl is another issue. The San Diego area sees between 80 and 90% of the methamphetamine and fentanyl seizures annually for our entire country. With little enforcement at the border, these drugs were coming through in mass. During my last year in San Diego, the price for a single pill of fentanyl, for example, went from $10 to 25 cents. To make matters worse, during 2022 and 23, I had to shut down San Diego traffic checkpoints, which are critical for drug interdiction, because the resources had been diverted to the process and release mission. The large numbers also had and still have a negative impact on the San Diego community. I had to release illegal aliens by the hundreds each day into communities who could not support them. To quiet the problem, 2 flights a week were provided from San Diego to Texas. These flights simply brought aliens that would have been released in San Diego over to Texas. Each flight cost approximately $150,000. This was the administration's way to try and quiet the border-wide crisis. Once these flights were stopped and the releases continued, California saw the true economic impact. I received calls from the governor's office, local mayors, and hospital administrators asking me if we could keep injured aliens in custody so the federal government would pay the medical bills. Through pressure from the administration, my headquarters became more interested in the fiction that being portrayed in the media, and not at all concerned. At times in San Diego, we had 2,000 or more aliens sitting in between the fences asking to turn themselves in. I was told to move them out of sight of the media. Meanwhile, Border Patrol agents are continually forgotten and neglected by the media and this administration. These agents deal with death, women and children that have been raped, abused, trafficked, bought and sold, families that have spent months in terrible conditions, sickness, and despair. If you look at the dramatic rise in the number of suicides within the Border Patrol, it is directly correlated with the migrant surge. The agents have been pushed beyond their limits. Current numbers of aliens crossing our border are lower in comparison in recent months. There's a reason for this. After nearly 4 years, this administration finally started to ask Mexico for help in slowing down the traffic through their country. This and other actions make a difference, but why has it taken so long? All of these tactics were being used before this administration took office, but this administration stopped or greatly limited them. I'm also concerned this will not be maintained. The problems we are facing at the border have solutions. These solutions can be quite simple and cost far less than the mess currently occupying so much time and money. The return to a policy of enforcing the law and returning illegal aliens to their home countries is required.
Mr. Hockey, you served as the last job, you were the sector chief of one of our 9 Southwest border sectors. And I think you said you worked for 25 years in the Border Patrol under 5 different administrations. And looking at your statement, you said, under those 5 administrations, whether through neglect or on purpose, I saw large-scale lapses in our ability to return people to their country of origin. You then went on and talked about detention and how detention bed space was intentionally decreased and private detention was essentially done away with. You said that word got out and then the masses came, essentially. I'm paraphrasing you. But I want to go back to your comment about whether it was neglectful or purposeful, because if you intentionally stop returning people, that's not the thing you neglect, and you intentionally decrease detention, those things that actually decrease the incentive for people to come here, that sounds purposeful to me. So would you answer? I mean, do you think it's neglect, or do you think this was purposeful, designed to be this way?
I believe that the actions were purposeful, yes, sir. Many people don't understand that we can't simply fill a plane full of nationals from a certain country and fly them home. It takes agreements with that country. It takes diplomacy with the State Department to make those arrangements, and they're long-term arrangements. It takes diplomacy over months and years. But
purposeful.
But purposeful.
Purposeful. Okay. So you mentioned too that there were massive periods of time when the border was just left completely open because the agents had to be pulled and you were directed to do this. And how long were those agents just completely off the border and miles of the border wide open?
There were weeks and even months at a time between Texas and parts of Arizona and California.
And I assume that's, we want to look at these 8.
Now, you guys remember we actually talked about that particular situation. There was a situation where there was a large influx of migrants that were coming in the Arizona sector of the border, and a large influx of migrants that came in from the San Diego sector of the border as a result of some things that were going on in Arizona, and they had to unman certain portions of the border and bring those border agents to other places. If I'm not mistaken, I think to like Eagles Pass, and do quote unquote processing, like they called it. If you guys remember us talking about that, give me a thumbs up. If you guys don't remember that, give me a thumbs down.
ISIS folks that were caught in New York, I guess some of them actually crossed at a crossing. They filled up the CBP1 app, 3 of them, and came into the country, and we're going to blow up an LGBTQ place in Philadelphia. But I mean, those people that crossed during that time, any guarantees that they're not out there to do harm to the country?
No, sir, no guarantees.
You agree with the FBI director then. You mentioned it twice in your testimony too. I find it fascinating that because it was overwhelming San Diego, the administration actually created $50,000 plane flights to Texas of all these people as a way to keep it quiet. And then you mentioned too, there was one point where you had like 2,000 aliens, and the administration directed you to like move them out of sight of the media. Can you kind of clarify that a little bit?
Yes, sir. Groups were coming in to turn themselves over faster than we could keep up. We only had so much space. We keep people within our stations. There's no other place to put them in while they're being processed. And it looked bad, and they wanted them moved. I had no place to put them, and so they simply told me.
Why would they want to hide that? Why wouldn't they want the world to know what's going on? Why would they want to hide that? Why would they want to spend $150,000 to fly them to Texas to keep people from seeing the mass waves? Why?
It looks bad. When I asked about the flights to Texas, I was very specifically told there's a problem in Texas. There isn't a problem in California.
Wow. So purposeful policies wreaking havoc on a community, and we'll just hide it. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, that's wild, man. You know what I'm saying? That is crazy. And what's interesting about that is, that's news, right? And, the other news agencies have just become a daytime talk show. They're just a daytime talk show. They're not talking about this kind of stuff.
In San Diego, we had an exponential increase in significant interest aliens. These are aliens with significant ties to terrorism. At the time, I was told I could not release any information on this increase in SIAs or mention any of the arrests. The administration was trying to convince the public there was no threat at the border.
Wow. That was retired Border Patrol Chief Aaron Heitke accusing the administration of hiding information about the alarming spike in border crossings with migrants suspected of ties to terrorism. Senior Research Fellow for National Security at the Heritage Foundation, Brent Sadler, is here to react to this. Brent, simple question. Is there a cover-up now by this administration, specifically by the Department of Homeland Security, on how many really bad terrorist actors have sneaked in without any kind of vetting into our country?
Well, this is information that I think American citizens.
I just got to point this out. He said sneaked in. It's snuck.
Citizens are, they should have access to the station. It should not be suppressed. It's important for us to make decisions.
But do you think it has been suppressed?
Absolutely. I think very about this kind of tendency, predilection of the current administration to do this. And it's not limited to what we're seeing from DHS.
So how big a threat to national security is it? Should we, I hate to say it, but should we expect something bad to happen? Some terrorist activity set off by one of these migrants that sneak across the border without any proper...
Facts. Shout out to AW1. AW1 said, yo, Rob, he sounds woke. Yo, he sound mad woke.
Preventing.
I think it's a matter of when, not if, because there's unvetted, unknown, and there certainly aren't the type of controls and not the capacity to go after these folks if we do have a tip. And just look at what the Secret Service is having problems doing in protecting the candidate President Trump. So there's a lot of questions.
Which is also, by the way, under the purview of the Department of Homeland Security. That's where Secret Service lives now, and they're in charge of the border and Secret Service, and on both fronts they seem to have failed, or at least are.
Yeah, facts. They will go into repeat overdrive mode, talking about the quote unquote bipartisan bill that quote unquote Trump didn't want to pass, and not mention anything about the past 3 years that Biden and Harris were actually sitting in the White House and could have done something about that. You know what I'm saying? You know, like it's wild, man. It's crazy. We're living in some very, very interesting times. I told people, man, the significant changes that the world is going to go through, we're gonna be here to see them. You know what I'm saying? We're definitely gonna be here to see them. Real quick, shout out to everybody, man. I appreciate y'all. If y'all could throw them 100s in the chat, we on the 1-to-1. We got 24 people watching and 25 likes. Let's try to get the likes to 50.
Slipping noticeably.
Absolutely. They've lost sight of who their responsibilities are to. It's to the American taxpayer and citizens. And this, what we're seeing now, covering up and trying to move away attention from inconvenient truths, it's the last thing. They need to be held accountable, and they need to do their jobs and be responsible to the taxpayers.
We have another national security crisis that came from the border, and that's the increase in crime. These international organizations like Tren de Aragua from Venezuela, which is now spreading out in towns all over America, from the West Coast, middle of America to the East Coast, big cities, smaller towns and cities.
Shout out.
What
Jab, what's good with it, bro?
Well, the first thing, arrest the individuals, to have them prosecuted rather than let out on with no cash bail.
But that's a local answer to the question. I'm wondering, I mean, we remember FBI was really started by J. Edgar Hoover as a response to the Cosa Nostra, to another international crime organization that had invaded America back in the 1930s. Do we need something like that on the federal level?
Well, I would actually probably take it to the next level and say that we have to do a far better job along our border, and that might require bringing in National Guard and the military to make sure that the border is secured, because nothing else can happen. Nothing else is possible unless you've got that border.
Yeah, no, I've heard this being thrown around, the military on the border. I don't think that's a bad idea. Me personally, I'm trying to figure out why that's not something that had been done already. Let me ask you guys how you feel about that. How many people would be in support of a militarized border? If you guys would be in support of a militarized border, give me a thumbs up. If that's not something that you support, if you think that that's a bad idea, then give me a thumbs down and let me know why.